All right, guys, so I'm going to give a quick background on being able to use some really handy features in Zoom. The first one that I'm on here is I'm just sharing my screen. So as you'll see in Zoom, when you first start a video, um, as a host, you will be able to have these kind of control items down here at the bottom, and I'll show you a few handy features about that. But one thing I know that we're going to need to be able to do is to share the screen. So one thing about sharing screen is that you can choose the windows that you decide to share. So if, for example, I wanted to only be able to show my manage back screen, but I didn't want students to, whoops, I didn't want students to be able to see my email. I can pull out my email from that window, and that's no longer going to be sharing that part of the screen. And then if I choose to do a new share, I can choose a different window to share. The other helpful thing here is, we can use a whiteboard, which is really helpful when you're trying to show worked problems or something of that nature. I personally have bought a little pen pad with a pen. I think I got it for 20 bucks on Amazon. But this just kind of helps it so that I can, teach specific things that I might have to actually model out and show. So that's something helpful as well. And I'm just going to go ahead and delete that, close out of here. And a couple of other things to take note of is it's can be really frustrating when you're having to constantly let someone into your meeting room again. So one option is that you can enable the waiting room or disable the waiting room. If you go to this security bar and then select, if I have this enabled, now if anyone new tries to join the meeting, I'll have to admit them, which can become really distracting during lessons, especially if people accidentally close out and then come back in. So I'm going to choose to not have the waiting room enabled. That just means that kids can be sitting there waiting for me until I start class. A couple of other things in here, you can choose whether or not the participants can share their screen here. That can be helpful if you're asking students to show their work. They can easily do that here by allowing them to share. You can turn on or off the chat. So if things become inappropriate in the chat box, you can make that to where they can change that or not have that accessible. You can also do where they rename themselves. I actually choose to have this off with my students because I like to know if someone turns off their video, which they shouldn't be doing, but if someone turns off their video, I can still identify who is who. And then in the chat box, if something inappropriate comes up, I'm not like, wait, who is that? So that's one other helpful thing. And then one big question that was being asked was that of breakout rooms. When you are the host of a meeting, you can initiate a breakout room by selecting this button here, breakout rooms. And then you can assign however many you want to each breakout room. So if I had a class of 10 and I did 2 rooms, that means that I would have 5 people per room. Okay. And it can automatically generate those, or you can choose to have it manually done. But when I choose it manually, you'll see that I will have to assign them within a room. So I'd assign the Zoom user, which is really me on my phone, the Zoom user, and then that would give breakout room 1 to Kindle, breakout room 2 to Zoom user. And then if I wanted, I could go ahead and if I need to make them to where I only have one room, I would recreate the rooms, and then I could assign Kindle and Zoom user to that breakout room. And then I could also choose to just do add a room, where I can add a room and then I would assign someone. However, since this is such a small meeting, I don't have participants added to that. So if I were to open all of the rooms, also you can move participants into the breakout rooms. You can choose the options here. I can choose to close the rooms. If I'm like, you guys have 5 minutes to work, I can set the timer to 5 minutes, and then it will give the students a countdown for however long I choose. The students really like having the countdown just because it's kind of a warning for them to wrap up their conversations. So if I were to do this and I open all rooms, what that's going to do is it's going to take each of my breakout rooms, each of my students are going to have the choice to join the room. And what you can't see now is that my students have been given a notification, do you want to join the breakout room? And they'll just press join. And then once they do that, oops. So once they join that, it's going to take that person out of the room, and then now they're going to be in the separate breakout room. While I'm in this as the host, I can jump to and fro from different breakout rooms. Now I'm going to choose to join the breakout room with Kindle and Zoom user. So I press join, and that takes me as the host into their breakout room. And so now I'm meeting with them as individuals, and you can imagine that there would be another room. So let's say that I wanted to so this gives me an alert. Time is up for 1 minute for the breakout room. I'm going to close it now. And I could have, if I'd chosen, I could leave this room and I could go into another breakout room if I needed to meet with multiple groups of students. So that's beneficial in meeting with small groups. A couple of other things to take note of is you have the option for recording a session. And there are ways that you can do the settings for recordings. I personally don't like to have my sessions automatically recorded just because that becomes a lot of memory storage on my computer when sometimes it's not necessarily a lesson that needs to be recorded. Sometimes it's me just meeting with individual breakout rooms, and I don't actually want those recorded. But what you can do is you can, let's see here, I'm going to open up here. In your Zoom app on your computer, you can select the settings here, and you can go to view more settings, which will then open you up to a web page. And there are all sorts of things you can play with in here. But just for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to go to the recording tab here on the settings page, and I can choose to do automatic recording, which I turned on just now. It's here on this settings page, and I can either turn it on or off. And I'm going to choose for it to be off. And again, you can go through and look at all of the different types of settings. For the most part, the things that we have set up are pretty good already. But if you don't want to have the waiting room, you can turn that off here. You can also require passcodes and all sorts of things. But really, I don't think that there's all that much you have to do on in advanced settings. Most of it you can do right here in the Zoom settings that it allows. You can allow virtual backgrounds if you want to change it and get all fancy. Or you can go through, change your profile. Here's where you can figure out all the keyboard shortcuts. And I'm sure that there are a lot of other things, but for now, I really wanted to just get you guys able to use breakout rooms. And I know that when we get our cameras set up, there's going to be a few changes to that as well. But when we get our cameras set up, you'll be able to choose which camera is being looked at. I don't have mine listed here, but it will, when you click this little arrow, you'll have the option for UVC camera. But that's not there yet. I'm trying to think. Oh, yes, this one. You have the option to mute everybody. So if you have a student that is becoming obnoxiously loud on your Zoom meeting, you can open the participants tab and you can choose to either mute or unmute. You can ask them to start video. You can rename them. You can take them out of the classroom and put them in a waiting room if you want. You can remove them. You can send a personalized chat. But you can do things with individuals so that they are not being disruptive to your class. So again, that mute or unmute. So if I unmuted Kindle, he would have background noise. because he's in my class. But since I went ahead and muted him again, that took away from that background noise issue. Again, there are a lot of options you can do here. So mute participants upon entry. You can make it where participants are automatically muted so that when they come in, you're not hearing them talk to their neighbor or whatever. And yeah, there's just a lot of kind of some other options. If you have other questions, please just let me know.